Great. I think we are all live now. The switchover is very subtle. So welcome everyone. I don't want to take up too much time because we have two presentations here and only 40 minutes. So I'm jumping right in. I'm Kathy Fitch from the University of Minnesota. We're talking today Census Bureau applications of ACS data, and we have two speakers from the Census Bureau. There's bios on the lower part of your screen. The first thing I need to remember to say though is please add questions in the Q&A, and I will be sharing those with the presenters and reading those for the whole audience when we get to that point of the presentation. Also note, we're going to try to wrap up early because there'll be a quick change to the next set of sessions. So I think without anything further, I'm going to welcome our first speaker is Lakita Walker from the Census Bureau.
Hello, everyone. Let me get situated here. Sorry about that. I need to share my screen.
Oh, screen sharing.
It's
all right, let's
currently
see.
disabled.
What?
I have disabled.
Oh, all right. Let's see if we can get a little, send a note here.
Okay.
All right. Trying to see if I can get that started.
Okay.
Now this is the time that the two Midwesterners start talking about the weather, right? Isn't that what we were just saying?
Kathy, I can share that here. I have a copy of Laquita's presentation. Would you like me to
Oh,
do
was
that?
I supposed to share?
No, it's
No, okay. And I don't have sharing rights either.
I have a copy. Would that work for you, Laquita?
Yes, it will. That's fine. And then I'll just let you know when to switch to the next slide, Mark.
Yeah, and so Carol, RC event support. Actually, I am also getting a note that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. Can you enable that for all of us?
All right, so it's light rain here in Minneapolis. A little humid for my taste.
Okay, I'm able to share now.
Okay, great.
Excellent.
Yes, so we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, I'm gonna start the clock now on time, and I'll put those reminders in the chat box.
Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. I'll be talking about recent changes to household data and the measurement of same-sex couples in the American Community Survey, or the ACS. In order to meet the Census Bureau's mission to provide quality measures about the nation's people and households, we have been working over the last decade or so to improve our measurement of households and families, with a focus on improving measurement of same-sex couples. We have undertaken extensive research to develop and implement changes to the relationship to householder question, and have made adjustments to the methods for processing these data in Census Bureau surveys, including the decennial census and the ACS. This presentation will focus on the changes we've made to the relationship to householder item in the ACS, including changes to our response categories and editing procedures for same-sex couples. First, I'll describe what has changed regarding both the questionnaire item and the editing procedure. Then I will show you selected estimates based on our recently released brief, Same-Sex Couple Households 2019. As most of you know, we've been working to improve the measurement of same-sex couples by revising the relationship to householder question. This effort has focused on addressing some data quality challenges we've encountered. The problem is a statistical one, where a low rate of random survey measurement error in a large group, in this case, that would be opposite sex married couples, creates issues in the estimates of a smaller group. And so in this instance, we're referring to same-sex married couples. In the past, we approached our editing procedures for those who reported they were same-sex spouses by changing the relationship from spouse to unmarried partner, retaining the reported information on sex. In 2013, we showed same-sex spouses in the edited data. And in 2019, we added the newly implemented relationship to householder categories. This included explicit same-sex and opposite sex categories for both spouses and unmarried partners. Near the beginning of the interview, we asked how each household member is related to the householder, also called the reference person. This should be someone who owns the home or whose name is on the lease. Here you see a comparison of the relationship categories previously offered and the revised categories that were phased in. The categories of spouse and unmarried partner were expanded to distinguish between opposite sex and same-sex couples. Please note that the order of the current categories has been altered for ease of comparison. Unmarried partner did not actually appear next to spouse in the previous listing. It actually appeared further down the list following the various categories for relatives. So next we'll talk about some of the edit changes that were made. Beginning in 2019, we use a joint age, sex, and relationship edit. Along with the information from the new relationship categories, the editing procedures allow for the resolution of scenarios where relationship and sex are inconsistently reported in the data. Here are two examples of what I'm calling mismatched households, where the relationship and sex reports are inconsistent. In the couple pictured on the left, a man is reported as the female householder's same-sex spouse. On the right, both people are reported as male, but opposite sex spouse is reported as the relationship category. These types of inconsistent reports are mainly due to inadvertent mistakes, but are also likely reflecting some cases in which transgender people have done their best with the limited sex categories that are on the questionnaire. In any case, we do not output the data in this way. We make the relationship and sex reports consistent. Only about 0.5% of coupled households are mismatched. Our rationale for resolving these inconsistencies in ACS is based on data from the largest test conducted in the decennial program, the 2015 National Content Test, or NCT. Using the 2015 NCT data, we found that when we use a first names index and assume that those with names reported as male or female 95% of the time can be assigned to sex, the majority, or 61% of the mismatched couples, are opposite sex couples. If we relax the stringent assumption that the name must be reported male or female 95% of the time to 80% of the time, we find that 70% of the mismatched couples are opposite sex couples. In sum, the addition of the newly implemented editing procedures and response categories that now distinguish opposite and same-sex spouses and unmarried partners make it possible to see reports where the relationship category is inconsistent with the sex reported for the two members of the couple. We can now resolve these mismatches with new, more detailed information. Now turning to our same-sex couples household brief that we recently released. I'm going to share some of the important findings that are included. And the brief can be found on our website if you'd like to look at it in more detail. Nationally, about 980,000 households in the United States were same-sex couple households in 2019. Among same-sex couple households, approximately 58% consisted of married couples and about 42% consisted of unmarried partner households. This was in contrast to opposite-sex couples, where 88.3% were married couples and roughly 12% were unmarried partners. Among both married and unmarried same-sex couples, there were more female couple households than male couple households. Taking a look at the geographic distribution of same-sex couple households, it varied greatly across the United States. In 27 states, same-sex couple households made up a lower percentage of all couple households than a national average of 1.5%. States with the lowest percentages of same-sex couple households included North Dakota at about 0.5%, Idaho at 0.6%, and Montana, which also had about 0.6%. On the other hand, 11 states plus the District of Columbia had higher percentages of same-sex couples than the national percentage. The highest percentage was in the District of Columbia with 7.1%. Delaware and Oregon at 2.3 and 2.2% respectively were also among the states with the highest percentages. Now, taking a closer look at the metropolitan level, based on 10 of the metropolitan areas that had among the highest percentages of same-sex households, approximately 2.8% of all coupled households in the San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley MSA consisted of same-sex married couple or same-sex unmarried partner households. The Baltimore MSA had 2%, and this was about 1.3 times higher than the national percentage. Now, looking at some of the living arrangements, and specifically coupled households with children under 18 present, married couple opposite sex households at around 41% and married same-sex couple households at about 22% had higher percentages of children under 18 present than their counterparts in unmarried partner households, which had about 38.1% of opposite sex unmarried partners and 14.3% of same-sex unmarried partners. This underscores that a higher percentage of kids live with married couples than unmarried partners, and this held true whether the couples were opposite sex or same sex. Of all couple types, opposite sex married couples were the most likely to have children under 18 present in the household. Now, looking at couple households with children by type of relationship. In terms of the relationship to householder, among children under 18 who resided in coupled households, opposite sex couples were more likely than same-sex couple households to contain biological children only. Looking at the type of couple relationship, just over 83% of married opposite sex couple households with children contained only biological children of the householder. And this is compared with 51.6% of married same-sex couple households. Results were similar for unmarried partners, with just over 70% of opposite sex unmarried partner households contained biological children only in 2019. And this was compared with 44% of same-sex unmarried partner households. In contrast, same-sex couple households were more likely to contain adopted children only. Just 1.7% of married opposite sex couple households and just over 0.5% of opposite sex unmarried partner households included adopted children only. This is compared with 17.2% of married same-sex couples and 5.9% of unmarried partner same-sex couples. So to close, the revised relationship categories in ACS are part of a broader effort to get more accurate same-sex estimates across all census data products. These changes made to the relationship to householder response categories allows for improved measurement of specific types of family and living arrangements, including same-sex couples and their children. Thank you very much for your time today. If you have additional questions, please feel free to contact me at the information on your screen. And also, I encourage you to check out the ACS website for more details about the survey. Thank you.
Thank you. And excellent work on time. And we're gonna seamlessly transition over to Chase Sawyer, also of the Census Bureau. And I'll start the clock now. And a reminder that our goal is to wrap this session up at 11:37 Eastern time. I'll try not to let it go a whole extra hour.
Great, thank you, Kathy. And thank you everyone for being here today. I'm excited to tell you about this tool that's come out of the American Community Survey Office to allow people to better understand some of the demographic and socioeconomic characteristics that differ between data collection modes. I'm Chase Sawyer. I spent most of my career in the American Community Survey Office. Recently moved over to the Social, Economic, and Housing Statistics Division to be the team lead of the Community Resilience Estimates, which I talked about earlier this week, as well as Tori mentioned yesterday in the plenary session. But I'm very excited to talk a little bit about this tool that I created that allows people to see some of these differences between response modes. Here I have just an introductory slide about the ACS. This probably isn't the group that needs a long introduction to what the American Community Survey does. I just think it's pertinent to point out that we do survey 3.5 million addresses each year out of the population. And in reaching out to these individuals, we collect data through a variety of different response modes, which I'll talk a little bit more about in just a second here. There are a number of topics that are available in the American Community Survey as well. And not all of them, but a large number have actually made it into this tool. So I keep talking about this tool. So here it is. It's this data visualization of people and households represented in each American Community Survey data collection mode. And it allows people to get insights on how people are represented in each ACS response mode. And so there are multiple ways to access it. I've included the URL here. I also think we're going to get the URL dropped into the chat function so people can go ahead and just click on it. And that's one nice part about these virtual conferences. But the tool allows people to go ahead and see the distribution of each of these traits that we have by the response mode, as well as what percentage of people are represented in each response mode. And so before I dive more into the tool, I did want to just take a few minutes to discuss the ACS data collection process in case people need to know a little bit more about that. We are a multimodal survey, and so there are four main ways of collecting data. We start with our self-response. In 2013, we started with an online mode. It's then followed up with a mail questionnaire. And up until October of 2017, after the first month of data collection, we would begin non-response follow-up with telephone interviews. That was discontinued in October of 2017. Individuals can still respond via telephone assistance, but we no longer reach out with phone calls to individuals. And then the final data collection mode in the last month of data collection, we reach out to non-respondents through personal interview. So just a little bit more about each mode. And the reason that I go over some of these modes, even though they were implemented and discontinued at different times, is there is multiple years of data in the tool, so you can look at how it's changed over time as well. So it's starting in 2013, we have the internet response mode, and it's actually the one we most highly encourage our respondents to use, and it is available through the entire survey process. A few weeks after we send the initial mailing with the invitation to respond online, we then go ahead and send a mail questionnaire. And this again becomes available for individuals to use through the entirety of the survey process. Just a little bit here about the telephone collection mode. It used to begin 1 month after the mail out. It was discontinued in October 2017. We weren't getting the responses that we would expect from that mode, and it was becoming more and more costly. And as I mentioned earlier, respondents can still call the telephone questionnaire assistance. So that's why in the tool, you'll still see that there are some telephone interviews. In the final data collection mode for ACS is personal interview. There's a subsample of non-respondents that go to this mode, and it includes individuals that their household is unmailable, reluctant responders, as well as vacant households. And this is just a kind of graphical representation of what I just described, the fact that the internet response mode goes the entirety of the data collection period. Mail, once you receive that form, you can provide a mail questionnaire response. And then our telephone assistant, or our caddy operation used to take place between the second and the third month. And finally, the third month, the data collection is the CAPI interview mode. And so here's a little bit more about the data visualization. All of the data that's within it is representative of the population living in households or housing units. So group quarters aren't included in this. There is 10 years, or I'm sorry, there's 8 years worth of ACS estimates from 2010 to 2018. And again, I just want to point out that while this is helpful, and I think it provides people a starting ground to begin thinking about the response modes they offer, I wouldn't say that it necessarily implies causation. There's also things to think about, the fact that in ACS, the mode selection isn't random because the modes are introduced sequentially. So yeah, it's definitely not a mode bias study or anything to that effect, but we do think it's helpful for people to know a little bit more about this, because within the Bureau is a question that was coming up a lot, and we thought that others would be interested as well. And so here's the first part of the tool. It gives that distribution of the characteristics by response mode. So here you can see that overall, in the American Community Survey, we find 63.9% of households in 2018 were owner occupied. But if you were to look at that for some of those self-response modes like internet response or mail response, you can see that it's quite a bit higher. It's up in the 70%. There's a little hover over tool within the dashboard that you can use to go ahead and collect additional information, such as the margins of error, as well as the universe that this is, the percentage is conveying. So here, when we're asking about whether you're in an owner renter occupied home, it's excluding vacant homes. So the universe here is just occupied housing units. Then on the bottom portion of the dashboard, you're able to go ahead and see which response mode was used by people with these characteristics. So you can see that overall 43.7% of the population is represented in the internet response mode, but that's slightly higher for people that are in owner-occupied households, and then slightly lower for people in renter-occupied households, which we find more often go to personal interview. In this, we have the same availability to get the margins of error as well as the housing universe. And so now I'm going to just go through a couple of the key findings that we've seen when we're looking at the tool. Definitely encourage individuals, if you have it pulled up, you're you can go ahead and take your own look at it and see some of the things you're interested in. But these were characteristics that stood out to us. So this first one here is educational attainment. With that one, we find that higher educational attainment is more likely to be represented in the internet response mode. And we can see how that changes actually with educational attainment throughout on the bottom, with lower educational attainment being more likely to be represented in the CAPI interviews. Here we have household income, which is fairly correlated with education, but we see the similar results that higher income is more likely to use internet, and the same thing with lower incomes are more likely to go to a computer assisted interview mode to gather that response. Age is a key variable that we looked at when we were considering as well, looking at would we need to end phone interviews, because we know that mail and the CADI modes gather information on older individuals in these modes, but we can see on the bottom graphic that even that's a very small portion of the people that respond via those modes, that that operation was just shrinking in size over time. This next graphic, we go ahead and look at race, and so we see that white alone and Asian alone individuals tend to be represented in the internet at an above average rate compared to the rest of the population. Here for household type, when we look at family households that are married couples, they're more often represented in the internet mode, and family households without a spouse are often most represented in the CAPI mode. This is our final topic here that we look at, that the language spoken at home. And so just overall within the population, we find that 91.6 percentages of households speak English very well, or they only speak English. But we can definitely see differences with language through mode, especially Spanish. We see individuals that don't speak English very well and speak Spanish are represented in the CAPI mode at an above average rate. But the rest of the languages that we look at are somewhat similar to the overall. And so going forward, the American Community Survey has been using this to better understand our respondents and which modes they end up in. It's helping to guide further research, as well as we're also looking to do a deeper dive in our internet instruments, because we know that individuals, when they use the internet instrument, may respond on a desktop, a tablet, or their phone. So we're very interested in kind of making this even more granular. And again, we think this is very helpful to the broader research community, that they can see how the American Community Survey is gathering its responses and how people are represented in those various response modes. So again, thank you for taking the time today to hear about this. I'm excited for the question and answer, and you can always email me if you have additional questions. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Chase. I'm gonna leap right into the first question that was in the Q&A for Laquita. How does 2019 ACS estimates of same-sex couple households compare in reference to previous ACS estimates using sex and, see, we were all on time, using sex, relationship to householders, and living arrangements when such specific questions about same-sex couples were not available? So bridging the two measurement areas.
So that's a great question. Based on some of the previous research that was done on mismatching using administrative data, we think that it's an improvement now having that more explicit information. So in the past, we would only have information on the respondent's sex and if they reported if they were, for example, married or not, but we wouldn't necessarily have a specific additional piece of information that we get from them having to select if they're same sex or opposite sex. So if there's, for situations in which there was a mismatch between, for example, if there's a mismatch between what the respondent places as their name, the householder's name, the opposite sex or same sex partner or spouse's name, we're able to kind of make that consistent. In doing so, we found that and we kind of expected this, right? That there was an overestimation perhaps of cases where people mismarked their survey in the past. And now that we have this additional information, we saw a small decrease in the number of same-sex couples. That information is actually available. We have a same-sex couples table package that if you go to the ACS website, you should be able to access it. And we have it for each year. So you're able to compare 2018, for example, which was the last year that we had the old survey design. And then you can compare it to what we have for 2019, which has the newly implemented relationship categories.
Great, thank you. I think that's a twofer for the question Mark asked. Is that right on our Zoom link? That you can, that the expanded relationship categories are accessible in the published tables. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's in both the table package, which is a very specific, and then also our regular tables that you can access through data.census.gov for 2019. The tables have been modified to include that information where applicable. Great,
thank you so much. And it looks like Chase is ready to answer a couple questions. I'm going to display the first one for the Q&A, folks. All right, how do you collect data in very rural areas without internet, possibly without reliable mailing addresses, areas like Navajo Nation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we've done, so I guess to address the first question about very rural areas without internet, we've done some testing to determine whether or not certain areas would benefit from just getting the mail package first, as opposed to just having that internet response option. I'm not sure the status of that right now, but yeah, by having all of these different modes, it does make it so we're more likely to capture data for those individuals, even if they don't have internet access. So they usually either their mail response or the CAPI interview will get those individuals represented in the survey. I like the mailing addresses portion of that though. So the Census Bureau uses the master address file to go ahead and be used as the way that we sample for ACS. And it actually includes places that don't even have addresses on it. There are places that are just random discrete descriptions of an area because we recognize that some people don't live in a home with an address. And so some of that comes up in some of these areas that may not have developed addresses, that we still have them on our master address file, and we make efforts to go out to them. The CAPI or the computer assisted in-person interview, actually, we go to those households at a higher rate because we know that they're not going to have the opportunity to use one of the other response modes.
Great, thank you. I think we've got, there's one more here that I'll start you on. Depending on how quick that is, we might be able to get in one more if someone wants to post it. The next question for Chase, is this research or this type of research used for weighting in the ACS?
Definitely, no, that's a great question. So yeah, using this for weighting predates the research that I've done, and use of the tool, that we know that because there's a subsample, we go ahead and for CAPI in those in-person interviews that they have to have a different weight. I think that this kind of research though has been being looked at for this 2020 data collection year. Again, because I've moved into a different role, I haven't been as involved with it, but I know that there's definitely interest in that because the way that we gathered responses in 2020 was so much different than in prior years. And I know that Mark Osceola will actually be talking about that later today in a plenary session. So I think that would be a great place to learn a little bit more about that.
Excellent. Do either of you have questions for one another?
We work together, so
Yeah. Yeah.
You know where to find them? Is that what you're saying?
in other words.
We've done a little bit back and forth on some of these projects. So yeah, I don't know that we have questions for each other.
All right. Well, and we were all like, anticipating a very precise ending here. And so I feel like I could ask questions too. I love these things about the measurement and dealing with the, trying to get those household measurements right is so challenging with small amount of error on a large population and create, problems. So I'm excited that the changes to the ACS are improving those household measurement issues. And I think we can I'll check one more time. Oh no, one here. I don't know. Let's see here. I'll get it here so that Cliff Cook is asking, is data available on same-sex married couples at the MCD or place level?
What, I didn't hear the last, I heard place level.
MCD, minor civil division, I believe that is.
Oh, not at this time.
Okay.
Detail.
All right. We'll take that very quick. Yeah, not at this time, and we can get that answered and still end on time. So thank you, and my thanks to the presenters, and everyone take a quick couple minutes and come back to the second half of these sessions in a few minutes. I will be heading to using the ACS to measure income and unemployment, so maybe I will see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.